Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call tonight's regular council meeting to order. Recommendation that the regular meeting be suspended and the committee of the whole meeting be convened. Moved by Councillor Adey, second by Councillor Randhawa. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. I'd like to call tonight's committee of the whole meeting to order. Recommendation of the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting of February 25th, 2019 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we have a couple presentations tonight. First up, we have Susan Marsden, the Director Curator at the Museum of Northern BC, giving a community update. Welcome. Maybe the highlights. And there's a little speaker button there on your microphone there. Sorry to interrupt you there. Just there you go. Perfect.
Yes?
There you go.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be very... This is the brief version, and it's 30 minutes long, so I'm gonna whip through it. Okay, so Museum of Northern BC's activities, services, events, and programs vary from season to season, from October to April, and from May to September. The museum is usually called upon to report to its granting agencies on the basis of the calendar year, however. So from that perspective, the museum can be seen as having 3 seasons, from January to April, May to September, and October to December. January to April 2018, we had a really exciting traveling exhibit from Sherbrooke, Quebec called Clovis the Caribou Hunters, and it was extremely well attended by school groups. And it was in French as well, so the French school came as well. And we also developed a Bella Arte's Archaeology Adventures and Artistic Fun to tie in with it. So if you look on the second page, you can see some of the local children enjoying the various aspects of the exhibit. I did tell Rose Balderson that I'm hoping that, well, I ask you not to share the photographs with the public because we try not to take pictures of our guests because they tend to feel violated sometimes, so just these are for your information. Concurrent with the exhibit, Clovis the Caribou Hunters, there were numerous other activities which I've just listed here. I won't go through them in detail. One of the highlights was the Children's Festival at the Civic Center March the 3rd. There's another one coming up this coming Saturday. Yep, this coming Saturday. We did a DI make your own slime. It was very well attended. We had 200 kids make slime on that day. In May, visitors from around BC, Canada, and the world start arriving. This is the May to September section. And the museum's second season begins. In May and June, there are still school programs in addition to the first cruise ships and bus tours. These 2 months can be quite hectic. In May, the museum produced programs for students and adults, local and visiting, on 20 of the 24 days it was open, and in June on 27 of the 30 days it was open. Also, in May and June we had 2 art exhibits, one Unique Perspectives artworks from the collection of Doug Moore, and in June we had an exhibit, Intimate Journey, a West Coast Adventure with Paint and Pen by Anne-Marie Harvey, who is married to the son of Ruth Harvey, so it was kind of nice for her to have an exhibit in the gallery. And the previous page shows you some of the exhibits we did in May and June. The cruise ships begin their visits in May and have recently visited as late as October. The museum offers these visitors 2 programs sold on the ship, a 2-hour heritage bus tour and the feast tour. For independent visitors from the cruise ships, the museum offers Seasons of Change tour. Each cruise line selects the tours they would like the museum to offer their guests. In the past few years, the museum has consistently provided, this is from port statistics, the onshore experiences for 1/3 of each ship's passengers. This in addition to approximately another 1/3 of the passengers visiting the museum independently. And then I go on to talk about some of the other visitors that come by bus and rail, and a few of our other tours that we do for them. And the following page shows you some sample photographs of some of our tours. In 2017-2018, visitors to the Museum of Northern BC came from over 210 Canadian cities from 9 of the 10 provinces and the 3 Northern Territories, from over 125 U.S. cities, from 37 of the 50 U.S. states, and from over 38 other countries from around the world, from Azerbaijan to Brazil and Wales to Cyprus, with significant numbers from Australia, Belgium, Germany, Netherlands, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. Once here, the visitors seem to be pleased with their experiences and leave very positive comments in our guest books and on various travel sites online. I'll just read the beginning of one comment from TripAdvisor. The museum was the best museum I have ever experienced. The history and exhibits and gift store are amazing. The building itself is awesome. The staff is great as well, very welcoming and friendly. And then there's more comments there from TripAdvisor and more from our guest books. October to December. The October to December season actually begins in September, when cruise ships, tour groups, and independent travelers continue to visit in significant numbers. But it is also at this time that community and school programs get underway. In fact, September is a month like June when school groups and adult educational groups make their annual and biannual visit to the museum. And there's a list of some of the groups that come every year, and some of the programs that we also did in the October to December season. And also in October to December, we did 3 exhibits in the Ruth Harvey Art Gallery. One, Our World, an exhibit in memory of Dorothy Jarvis, a Tsimshian artist who lived in Vancouver and Victoria and who painted memory paintings. Celebrating Northern BC artists, the Ridley Terminals Inc. Art Initiative. That was the 5th that we've done in collaboration with Ridley Terminals. And I Like It Up Here by Suzo Hickey, originally from Prince Rupert and now moved back, and celebrating Prince Rupert in her paintings, which are really interesting and beautiful. And here's some pictures of some of the school programs, diversity of programs we offer. In the 28 fall-winter season, Prince Rupert families also enjoyed 2 family Bella Artes programs, Autumn Crafts and Winter Woodland Crafts, both very well attended by very creative families. You can see on the following page. The museum staff also respond to inquiries and requests on a daily basis, and the last paragraph on this page is just the kinds of inquiries we had in one day in February. So I'll leave that to read on your own. And the next pages are Autumn Crafts. We have a very talented staff person, Erin Alger, who does these. She always comes up with wonderful ideas and people love them. In fact, the adults ask, can we do it too? So must be doing something right. And there's our art gallery exhibits for the fall. And we had some speakers at the RTI exhibit that talked about their work, and Suzo Hickey's exhibit. And then there are the satellite facilities the museum owns and or operates, the artist studio mentioned above, the dance performance longhouse where the museum's dance group and tour guides do programs for visitors and school groups, which is periodically rented out for workshops and training programs, and the Quinitza Railway Station Museum. And there's a TripAdvisor comment here on the Railway Museum, and also a summary by one of our staff members on the summer at Quinitza. And then so there's some pictures of the dance performance longhouse, the studio, Henry Kelly carving, he's in there currently, and Quinitza Railway Station Museum. Next page is museum highlights for 2019. I won't go into them, but we have another traveling exhibit coming in September, from September to December, and the subsequent pages are about the exhibit. It's called Biomimicry, about how we can learn from nature to make our lives better. And there are a couple of photographs there of this exhibit. It's also from Quebec. And now, in closing, a brief on funding. Funding history. In 1996, the last year before the museum relocated to the Chatham building, so that's when we were in the old building, the city grant was $138,000. In 2003, the city raised the museum grant to $180,000 because the visitor center was taken out. Between 2004 and 2006, the city grant was reduced to $117,000. That's when I think that was because of the mill. And in 2014, the city grant was increased to $126,000. That's the past. The present. With fixed costs having increased dramatically, especially hydro and gas, and with repairs and maintenance becoming a factor at the new museum's 20-year mark, the board developed and implemented a fundraising succession plan in 2018. A director of development was hired to explore the broad spectrum of fundraising opportunities for operating expenses and project expenses. The position was successful in identifying and generating funds for projects such as the 2018 traveling exhibit, repairing the building, and a collection database project. But it was also very successful in verifying the premise that there are simply no operating grants out there. It was intended that the Director of Development would gradually take over the director role of the current director-curator as part of the succession plan, in hopes of returning to a two-person administrative team. With no increase in operating revenue, it was not possible to proceed with the succession plan, which the board is now in the process of revising. The museum is currently developing the online access to the museum's collection. We were delighted to bring the Clovis traveling exhibit to Prince Rupert, and we have now raised $317,000 for building repairs, but there is still no solution to the need for increased operating revenue. The Museum of Northern BC is an icon in Prince Rupert, and as Premier Campbell said, one of the three cultural jewels in BC, along with the Museum of Anthropology and the Royal BC Museum. It is rare for a museum with a collection, exhibits, and programs of this quality to be found in a community of this size. The museum receives appreciation and praise from visitors to our city and from the majority of Prince Rupert citizens. It is the anchor attraction for the tourism economy, and as such helps to generate business revenue and jobs. It provides recreational and educational experiences for hundreds of students, children, and adults. And in addition, the building that houses the museum is a rare example of Northwest Coast monumental architecture, and serves, along with the courthouse and City Hall, to make Prince Rupert unique in its architectural heritage. The museum is a community asset that merits appropriate support, without which it will not survive. I would like to end with an excerpt from my last year's report at the AGM. Those of you that were there will remember this maybe. By the end of the year, so I think I was talking about 2016 then, 2017 or 2017, we were celebrating a new relationship with City Hall, to whom we are very grateful for initiating a 3-year contract for stable, reliable city funding. We can't say enough about what time saver that arrangement has been on many fronts. Tonight, the museum requests that the existing contract be renewed for another 3 years, and that the city consider an increase in funding for the museum's grant.
Thank you very much. Any questions and comments from council? Councilor Morrow.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's heartening for me just on that last piece there around the initiating the 3-year contract. It's heartening for me in particular. That was something I was very passionate about in reforming the community enhancement grant process, to try to give you guys as community groups more stable, predictable funding so that you could plan years ahead. And I'm glad that we can agree that that has worked very well for both sides.
I'm not a gusher, as people know, but
Yeah.
it was fantastic.
And so from our perspective, why it's such a win-win from my perspective is it allows us then in our 5-year financial forecast to really plan out exactly what's going to happen, rather than asking you guys to come back year after year with your hat in hand.
Yeah.
So I'm really heartened to see that. I'm just left with two questions. So when you're asking to renew the contract for another 3 years, if my math's right, if you were saying that at the last AGM, that would mean the contract would expire at the end of next fiscal?
We've received our we've received our third year of funding this
This current
January.
year, okay,
Yeah.
so it would be
2020
for the
is
next budget, okay.
starts, yeah.
And so have you had a preliminary conversation with staff yet about what that increase you're looking for is for the coming fiscal?
No, in fact, when I got a letter from Mr. Mandrick to come to this presentation, so I was trying to get in touch with him to find out about the process. And then I found out he wasn't there, and as far as I know, nobody's replaced him. So as soon as the city appoints somebody to discuss it with us, we're right there and ready to go.
Okay, so but you're covered for this fiscal, so it's moving on to next. So
Yeah,
thank you. That's
yeah.
all. That's the only questions
But
I had.
December comes really fast.
It does, yeah. No, thank you very much for your presentation and for your time tonight.
No, thank you.
Councillor Callahan?
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very enlightening. It's nice to see the other side of the museum, like it's not just a place to go and visit old artifacts and things like that, but it reaches out to multiple levels of the community and educates a lot of young kids in that and gets them involved in their culture and history, and I think it's great. One little jewel that I always promote whenever I can is the gift shop there, because it's got great deals there, and it's all local artists, and the wife loves it. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, and thanks for doing great job for our community. So like last few years, how's our number looks like, visitor numbers like going up, or how are we doing that one?
You know, we used to be able to go online on Destination BC, but now you have 6 levels of passwords, and I can't find the stats anymore. So, but from our stats, we were pretty much. We had a banner year in 2017 for cruise ships, like a banner year. It was fantastic. And I thought, oh, this is the new reality. But no, 2018 was woo. So it's pretty hard to predict. But with the cruise ships going down in 2018, we still only went down by 1,000 visitors. So far for us, the visitorship is staying pretty constant. Although we did have a big hit when we lost the ferry, the extra ferry extra ferry voyages, yeah. But there is an extensive collection of statistics on Destination BC, and I certainly would like to know what our because they go to the hotels and ask them for the information and so on. But from our perspective, it's only down 1,000 in 2018.
First of all, I'd just like to thank you all for coming out and presenting. I really think the museum is an integral part of our community, and that's something that's super important on all fronts for us to maintain that history and that culture. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. Always a pleasure to have
Thanks
you
for
here. Thank you
yours.
so much. Okay, next we have a presentation from Luann Roth from the she's the North Coast Estuary campaigner for the T-Buck Suzuki Environmental Foundation regarding anchorage safety concern for the Skeena Estuary. Welcome. Yes, we have the copies here.
Well, thank you very much for having me here. My presentation is about anchor safety, and I started looking into it because I've sort of noticed quite a few anchor dragging incidents myself, and I was concerned with the new projects coming to Prince Rupert. So what I did was I looked at the Transport Canada statistics for Prince Rupert and Vancouver, just to find out what the situation was. And so I've got a graph there for you all. And we used to have about one anchor dragging incident a year, which that's how many I thought we had, and I wanted to verify to raise the alarm. But when I looked into it, I found that it's just been going up, very fast, and we're up to about 7 average a year now. In 2017, which is the last year for which there were complete statistics, there were 11. So these are risk of grounding incidents of large vessels, and they occur while anchored in the Prince Rupert area. So what happens is, when there's a strong wind, the anchor doesn't hold, and the vessel isn't under control. So it can be a serious incident or a not serious incident, depending on what the situation is. In our anchorages, so I've got just a diagram here of some of the anchorages in the main harbor, and I put a circle around one that's 500 meters. And the anchor chain is about 270 meters, and these new large vessels we're getting here are around 225, 230. So this, I just put one for 500 meters because 200, that's what it adds up to, the vessel itself and the anchor chain. So you can see there's not a lot of extra room. Like the circle I put is off of Rushbrook, and if that anchor drags when it's at extension and that vessel happens to be blowing towards the rocks, it doesn't have any room to maneuver. It's basically right at the rocks, and the other side is right by Rushbrook. And most of the anchorages are fairly close to some rocky shoals. Which is a different situation in Vancouver. Maybe we have a big area of sandy ground with no rocks. So Anchorage 7, it just happens that an incident there was written up in a scientific journal, marine journal. The engineer was doing an analysis of how much impact the current had and the wind. He was looking because the two forces work together. His vessel was an 82,000 deadweight ton vessel. And so it was an Anchor 7. You can just see there, it's fairly close to the rocks. On the next page, there's a diagram showing the actual vessel track after it dragged anchor a bit, and you can see it was right by the rocks. And he said in his report, to sum up, there's not sufficient safety margin in adverse weather. And he described the incident as extremely dangerous. Now the governments have known for quite a while that there is an anchor safety issue in Prince Rupert. In the 1972, the federal provincial government did a joint report. And they said that for vessels over 50,000 deadweight tons, they'd have to anchor in Port Simpson for any length of time. And in 1995, another report reiterated that and mentioned that poor anchorage, mentioned poor anchorage here. Ships frequently drag anchor, and they thought the reason was a thin layer of mud overlies smooth rock. And so that might be the reason, that we're having these issues. But why are they increasing so much? What's going on? So it's not because we've got more vessels coming into Prince Rupert. The number of vessel visits is remaining relatively stable, around 450, 460 a year. But the cargo's going up, but it's because the size of the vessels is going up. So there's more and more vessels over that, in that larger size range, 80,000 deadweight tons. So, and the warning was about vessels over 50,000 deadweight tons. So, Vancouver would be getting more large vessels too, I'm sure. So, you know, I'm looking at them, at their situation, but they're not having the same problem that we are, and it's probably because of the bottom, right? So, you know, I was just shocked when I saw the statistics, you know, because the number of incidents we're having is not normal, not at all. Like, we used to have about one a year. That's about where Vancouver is, even though they get so many more visits than us. But now we're up to around, you know, 7 a year. It's hard to say it's going up so fast, right? 11 in 2017. I heard that there might even have been a couple more. 8 last year. That's just what I heard. That's not in the official statistics yet. But there's something going on. There's definitely something going on. And the worry is, of course, right, that if one of these anchor dragging incidents happens to be just in the right direction and the ship goes on the rocks and breaks up, where, you know, we could have a fuel spill. And these large vessels have a tremendous amount of fuel in their tanks, and it's toxic. Bunker diesel is toxic, but diesel oil's toxic too. So, so we need to deal with it. That's what I think. And I'm asking council to ask the Minister of Transport, you know, either to endorse the letter we suggested or write your own letter, but to ask the Minister of Transport to look into it, to, you know, to do something. They have this $1.5 billion fund for ocean protection plan, and a lot of the anchorages aren't within Prince Rupert Port Authority boundaries. It's, you know, it's a general issue. And the other thing that I'm asking is that we do a marine risk assessment of the risk of a spill related to the VOPAC project as part of the assessment. So the Transport Canada and Prince Rupert Port Authority are doing an environmental assessment of VOPAC right now. And we've asked them, and several environmental groups have asked them to look at the risk from an anchor dragging marine incident as part of their environmental assessment. And I'm worried it's not going to happen unless there's, you know, some pressure. So that's another thing. And I think it's a reasonable request because, you know, I'm not sure if we have, you know, 40 anchor dragging incidents, how likely is one of them going to result in a fuel spill? But if we have no toxic diesel product in the cargo, you know, it's a way bigger issue. Plus, VOPAC's bringing in 150 new vessels. We have 450 now. It's a big increase, and they're all going to be the 80,000 deadweight ton size. So, yeah, so it really has to be looked at. There are some possible solutions. A report in 2012 to the Prince Rupert Port Authority by Det Norsk Veritas, that's a well-respected international marine organization. They recommended that the port investigate mooring buoys to eliminate anchor dragging before introducing oil tankers. And as far as I know, that hasn't been done. And then, but there are other possible solutions, sheltered parking docks, or maybe limiting the size, not allowing the diesel cargo until we have this safe anchorages. I don't know what the solution is, but I think we have to look for some solutions. So thank you very much. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Questions from council?
Thank you for that. I appreciate that the anchor dragging is one aspect of the impact that shipping has on the local environment. And I think it may not be the only thing we would want to find out more about. I know there was one person shared with me a concern about air quality from, particularly from cruise ships. And it was my understanding that at some point back as far as maybe 2014, a report was made about that. So I guess what I'm wondering is whether it might be worth asking for some kind of an impact assessment on a number of different levels from the Ministry of Transport related to the fact that the number of ships that are coming here is going to increase. I don't obviously have any of those answers now, but I'm wondering where we might go with something like that.
I'll just say that we had a discussion about this at the regional district meeting on Friday, and some of the discussion was that obviously some more information is needed. This is the port's jurisdiction. It's a community issue, but I think from my perspective that it's required a dialogue with those who are responsible for managing these effects. So what we did as a resolution there was to reach out to the port and have some questions answered from them as a board. I think that's the same thing we should do here as a council, is try to get the agency responsible to answer some questions for us and see where they're at with it, because it's great that you're presenting this to us, but I personally have not heard from the port regarding this issue at all, and I saw that there was a news article today with some comments from them. So before we move forward with something like this, I think it'd be prudent for us to take a look and have some chats with the port as well, and then work together to see what a solution would be, or the long-term strategy for this, because obviously it's a multi-pronged issue in the community. I'm not going to claim I'm an expert at this, and so personally I would like to get some more information before I start moving forward with that. And that's where I'm at personally at this moment.
I just want to thank you for coming forward, and although I work in the industry, I'll just, because you know, I think it's important, and how we solve the problem is also important. Volpec and Wolverine are both on my radar, so I think it's something that has to be looked at very carefully.
Yeah, so I mean, I would just like to ask that have your have an independent look at it, because there is you know, there is a different mandate for, you know, what the public, you know, needs, what the importance of the estuary, and the port's mandate. And so this report that we've done up, I hope I'll get, you know, the copies available to you.
Absolutely.
And it's prepared from independent Transport Canada statistics. So, you know, so the facts are pretty clear, and you can maybe have your staff look and verify the facts and see that it really is increasing. It's far higher than Vancouver, and they're called risk of grounding incidents, and they're not, I don't think, low risk. And this engineering that we saw was saying that they're very dangerous. So
Absolutely.
thank you very much
Thank you.
for your time.
Thank you. And just so you know, the regional district has made a request to have you come and speak to our board as well. So I think this is just one of those situations where I don't think we're discounting that the information's wrong or anything. It's more about, let's make sure that everyone's a part of one discussion and see, and if there's not getting the answers we need, then definitely we need to get those answers for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you so much. Okay, any other members of the public who wish to speak to council today? We'll have Mr. Golden here first. Welcome.
Just a quick question. I see Zeno might be here. When we were doing the cannabis store, is it the Sears store? It said Unit 4, Unit 1, or something like that. And there's also, to me, it would make more sense. There used to be a smaller stationery store and stuff like that. So could someone tell which one of the?
It's the you remember where Red Shadow Boxing was? It's
That-
next same building, but next to the Sears store. So not the big store.
Okay.
Yeah.
The original drawing pointed to the Sears store, and it didn't make sense. But okay, thank you.
Yeah, the unit over. Thank you. I think I saw some folks in the back there that would like to come forward. You might as well. Welcome. Hi. You can just press that mic button right there too. Welcome.
I just wanted to ask, I hadn't quite had time to formulate my question, but regarding the port and issues with the city and the port, does the Port Authority ever come to council meetings where the public can hear, can be sort of savvy to the discussions, or to be able to present questions to them through you or through this venue?
Well, the port's come and made presentations before, but the port's a separate federal entity, and we can't force them to come to committee of the wholes or things like that. So I think it's more that they have their mechanism for how they engage, which I believe is their community information forum, and they have their open houses and things like that. But there's never been any sort of formalized process to try to get questions, and I know that they have their open dialogues with the CIF and everything like that people can go and ask questions to as well. So, but yeah, they
Because
mainly for presentation purposes.
so for something like this, which was just requested, if you discuss with the port, can the public be there for that discussion to hear their take on it?
The North Coast Regional District has actually requested a presentation from the port.
Oh, okay.
So when that's arranged, whether they come or don't, that's up to them. And that's where we're going to have those regional discussions, because it's not just a city's issue, it's actually a regional issue. So we feel that at the North Coast Regional District there'll be their presentation there, and then there'll be ability for the public to comment as well. So we can let you guys know that when they're going to come, and then you guys can come and
Yes,
listen to
that
them.
would
And
be great.
yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, could I get your name and address for the record? Your name and address just for the record?
Oh, sorry, right, forgot about that. Right. Thank you, Larry. Are there members of the public who'd like to speak to council tonight? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn and reconvene our regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Skelton Morvan. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks for attending. Okay. First up, we have a recommendation that the regular meeting, did that part. Adoption agenda. Recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of February 25th be adopted with additional petition and delegations agenda item 4A being an opportunity for public comment on the development variance permit application at 1045 First Avenue West. Moved by Councillor Renhowa, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting of February 11th, 2019 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Skelton Morvan. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 11th, 2019 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ady, seconded by Councillor Renhowa. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, so first we have an application for development variance permit at 1045 First Avenue West regarding, we're given an opportunity for any members of the public who would like to come speak on this development variance. This is a new process the council has adopted to allow the public to comment on variances. So if anyone has anything to say, they can come forward now. Well, if you don't know what it's for, it's probably not to your interest, but it's for a variance for 1045 First Avenue West. There's some adjustments they're making to the property. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to a representative from the Select Standing Committee regarding the Mayor and Council remuneration and per diem plan. Welcome.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Good
absolutely.
evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and staff. My name is Rory Gowler. I served on the Select Standing Committee regarding mayor and council remuneration, along with members Bonnie Ruderham, Bob Thompson, Scott Farwell, and Rosa Miller, with support of senior city staff. The committee was formed to review council remuneration and per diem due to a recent change in Canadian Revenue Agency's treatment of wages earned by mayor and councillors. That was the Bill C44. I'm here to present the recommendations of the committee. So there's 5 key points. Number 1, the committee concluded based on the information provided that the mayor position should retain its full-time status. The committee did not undertake a full review of the position as it was beyond the scope of the committee's terms of reference. 2, mayor and council to have their salary updated to include the annual salary adjustment as per bylaw number 2892 in 1994. This bylaw indicates the annual salary be increased based on a percentage change of the average weekly salary calculated on a year-over-year basis, and this data is provided by Statistics Canada. City staff have indicated that mayor and council have not taken the increases since 2014 in order to minimize tax impacts. Given that this type of freeze puts a council remuneration out of alignment with other local governments and can act as a deterrent for future candidates, the committee further recommends that no wage freeze be taken going forward. Number 3, the CRA has passed changes to the income tax treatment of council wages. Previously, 1/3 of their salary was exempt from taxation. The new treatment for 2019 going forward will mean all council salaries are 100% taxable. This change results in less after-tax net income to the council. The committee recommends increasing the adjusted salaries identified in number 2 to result in the same after-tax net income as would have occurred under the previous taxation rules. See if I can get this going. There we go. So according to this, the mayor's original salary was $60,000. With the bill being eliminated, 1/3 same net pay equals $69,078. And due to the increases foregone, this results in the wage of $71,638. Our standing committee recommendation is the mayor's salary be increased to $75,000 and the councillors to $18,750. This effect on the budget will be $55,600. Having reviewed the salary treatment of 9 other communities with varying populations, all under 70,000, including neighbors as well as resource and or growth communities, the full-time mayor gross salary should be restated to $75,000 and council gross salary be set at 25% of the mayor's gross salary. We also looked at travel per diems with respect to meals for council and employees that have been stagnant since the year 2000. At that time, the policy was changed to $70 for a full day and $35 for half a day. There was no differentiation between areas traveled to. Recognizing that some communities are more expensive to travel to than others, the committee recommends an adjustment as follows. A Tier 2 community will include Vancouver, Lower Mainland, Whistler, and Victoria, at which a per diem rate of $100 for a full day of travel and $50 for a half day be paid. A Tier 1 community will include all other communities in British Columbia, at which a per diem rate of $80 for a full day and $40 for a half day will be paid.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from council?
I would like to thank the committee for the work they put into this. I would also like to acknowledge that as a new councillor, it's a rather unsettling experience having to think through this stuff and eventually come to a decision. So my preferred way of thinking about it at the moment is that as this will be considered through the budget process, and that process includes opportunities for public input. I'm going to reserve my specific opinions until I have a chance to hear from other people about this. But I appreciate the work put into it.
Other comments from council?
I'd just like to thank you for doing this. It's, I guess it had to be done, and you did it, and now we'll look at what the public response and the budget impact is in that, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much.
Other comments from council? Yep.
I'd also just like to thank you guys for doing this work on our behalf. I know it's there's not very many professions in the world where you get to set your own wage, and it does create a little bit of an awkward situation for us as elected officials, where it is the very definition of a conflict of interest to vote on your own wage, but it's still written into the Local Government Act that that's how it has to be done. So I think I've made myself pretty clear throughout this whole process. I'm very much in favor of this committee structure to try to reduce that conflict as much as possible. So I agree with Councillor Ady's sentiments that I'd really like to hear the public's feedback on this, but I think everything presented. The only technical question I have is on the recommendation to use the adjustment factor moving forward, because I'm viewing this recommendation as this is not just for the coming fiscal year. This is something that you guys want instituted so that we never really have to deal with this issue again, that the adjustment factor will account for whether it's consumer price index, whatever that is. So the only question I had from a technical perspective was the adjustment factor moving forward. You had referenced the original bylaw from 1994.
Yep.
And the way that they have set the adjustment factor was based on the 100% rate of the average weekly wage in BC. Is that the same adjustment factor that you guys are recommending? Or are you recommending moving to an adjustment factor like the consumer price index or something else like that?
It would be the same as it always has been with the data provided by Statistics Canada. So every year, instead of you guys being able to vote for a freeze, this would be automatically included in your salary. That's, yeah. Yeah.
So
So we
calculated by
haven't
Statistics
changed the
Canada.
bylaw.
Yeah.
We're just going to make sure that we enforce the bylaw that this is, you can't say that, no, we won't take it.
Okay, I like that provision. So with the data as provided by Statistics Canada.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
You have to get closer to me.
If I could just make one comment, because I heard councillors making a couple of comments about deciding on their own wage increase or adjustments. I think the best way to think of this is not in terms of yourselves, because it's not about the existing council. There was never a word mentioned as we did the math on this about who the council members were. And to be fair, I don't even know all the council members. But the thing is that we have to think about the position and what the conditions of that position are, and what that means for our local democracy and encouraging, the best candidates that we can get, so that people are not excluded because of financial circumstances. And so when you're thinking about it, sort of the best way is to take yourself out of the picture completely. And I know it's hard to do. I mean, they once asked me to run with the Olympic torch. I knew it would be embarrassing as hell. And but I thought Canada had men in Afghanistan. All least I can do is embarrass myself in front of the whole community. So if it's a little hard to do, I totally understand that. But I think you've got to think of it as it's not you, it's the position. And what is the effect on our local democracy, rather than, and people's availability to be able to run for council, rather than, thinking of yourself and, this is kind of hard to do. Thanks.
No, I really appreciate that feedback, because that's exactly how I've been trying to approach this. Is my rationale is in voting for the public interest, it's how can we encourage the greatest cross-section of people to run for this office. We don't want income or their job status or their occupation to determine whether or not that they can represent their community or speak up for their community. So I think you guys have struck a good balance here, and I'm very keen to hear from the public in the upcoming budget process. So thanks again for your time in this process.
Councillor Renhawa and then Councillor Scott Mormon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. Did you get a chance to compare with our neighboring communities too, like how they approaching with this one?
Yes, we did. We had 9 communities that we actually did comparisons with. We were quite, Prince Rupert was quite low when we averaged it out to, especially the council members. So, yeah, we looked at this as a fact base. Like we said, I don't know actually any of you, maybe just to wave hi to you, but that's it. So this was a total fact based on comparisons through 9 different communities with a population comparable to us with different economics situations. So, we have the statistics presented to us.
Councillor Scott Mormon.
I'd just like to thank all of you for putting in the work to making this happen. I totally agree with you there, where it's not for us, it's being fiscally responsible for the future, and then the future of our democracy for our town as well, and attracting the right candidates that are not exclusively to those with strong economic standing that would be able to afford to maintain this position with all of the hours that are involved with this outside of council meetings. So I thank you very much for that, and I just, once again, just thank you. Thank you.
Other comments? Well, thank you very much for your time and your due diligence and your research. We really appreciate that. And the public's going to have an opportunity to comment on this during our budget process. There'll be a meeting on the 11th of March as well as the 25th of March, where none of this is set in stone, and the presentation after this will be the budget presentation. And so all of that will be considered, and then in April or May, a final consideration will be given to these terms. Thank you very much. Without further ado, we have our budget presentation from our Chief Financial Officer, Corinne Bauman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are presenting the 2019 municipal budget for the City of Prince Rupert. For the benefit of the Council, the viewers in the gallery, and at home, we have prepared a presentation to accompany the report to Council. The report itself is for information purposes, and it is requested that Council defer direction with respect to the 5-year financial plan and related tax rate bylaw until after public consultation and final BC assessment numbers are received. Our presentation order is as follows. We would like to take about 5 minutes to review some of our unique services and revenue challenges, which will be a recap of previous year budget presentations given they are still very much persistent. After, we will present the budget requirements and the impacted property taxpayers. Finally, we will outline our plans for public consultation. As mentioned in each budget season, an independent report on the capacity of the ferry service identified our airport as one of the most challenging to access in the industrialized world. We also operate the only ferry system in BC completely independent of any provincial subsidization program or BC ferry management. Although many of our neighbors and visitors benefit from the proximity of our airport, they only pay a user fee. Our municipal citizens pay not only a user fee when they fly out of Prince Rupert, but they also subsidize the operation through taxation. 2019 predicts a subsidization of approximately $1 million. In 2004, the province of British Columbia limited the major industrial mill rate for all municipalities with a qualifying port, export, import property. Therefore, the city can only charge a flat mill rate on industry that is considered eligible. Until this year, all of the City of Prince Rupert's operating major industrial businesses qualified for the limited rates. These flat mill rates apply to properties whose buildings depreciate in value, meaning they go down every year. A flat mill rate on a shrinking assessed value results in less taxation received by the city. In effect, there is diminishing revenue received from export-import industries yearly, and the only way to collect the same amount of industrial taxes each year would be if industry invested in their property annually, resulting in the value of the property at the least staying the same. We have been fortunate in that recent investment has resulted in an increase in the taxable portion of these properties. But make no mistake, this incentive program is not paid fully by the province. Instead, they have shared the burden with you as described in the next 2 slides. The province in part recognized that by cutting the municipal industrial mill rate virtually in half in 2004 would cause an enormous spike in the tax paid by residents and businesses. So they pay us the competitiveness grant as a means to offset part of the impact. This grant is only adjusted for inflation as determined by the Ministry of Finance. It does not compensate in full for the shrinking values realized every year. Since 2013, the grant has increased only $88,000. Finance takes this grant into account every year before the taxation need is calculated. Here's an example of the tax cap legislation as it impacts you. Let's assume a constant 5-year annual budget shortfall of $10 million before taxes. Because the city has to balance its budget, it must bring in the $10 million every year, and so the last resort is property taxation. In our example, the residential, business, and light industrial tax classes contribute $7 million in year 1, represented by the dark blue part of the graph, and the major industrial class, represented by the light blue part of the graph, contributes the other $3 million. In year 2, the city again needs to bring in taxes of $10 million, which represents no increase in operational costs. But the industrial assessment has declined, and so with the limited rate imposed by the province, the major industrial group can only be levied $2.75 million in tax. The only other source of tax income is from the remaining tax classes, residential, business, and light industrial. Therefore, their tax bill goes up from $7 million collectively in year 1 to $7.25 million in year 2. The same deficiency continues to happen in years 3, 4, and 5 because of declining industrial assessments and, in this example, no new investment. In our example in year 5, the other tax classes are now paying $8 million in tax, whereas in year 1 they were paying $7 million. And the industrial properties are now paying $2 million in tax, whereas in year 1 they were paying $3 million. So you can see the problem this incentive program causes when council can't set rates for all the tax classes. It essentially transfers the burden onto the other classes, and that's to maintain the same $10 million level of tax requirement. It doesn't take into account inflationary costs such as wages, services, supplies, and capital increases, which would be borne entirely by the other tax classes. This is a large contributing factor behind why taxes on the residential, business, and light industrial classes in Prince Rupert continues to increase without any noticeable change in services provided. For clarity, all 4 of the industrial companies benefiting from the provincial tax caps pay the taxes the city bills. The problem is the province has placed a limit on the property tax rate the city can use to collect taxes. Council has tried for years to make the province aware of the unintended consequence of this legislation. We continue to advocate that this provincial incentive program be compensated in total by the province. Now on to our budget requirements. Included in the operations budget are capital works and purchases funded in part by operating revenues. The balance are funded through dividends, grants, reserves, short-term and long-term debt and surplus. Examples of capital works and purchases included in the 2019 budget include Phase 2 of the water project, the completion of the West Berm expansion at the landfill, heating and system replacement at the recreation complex, the scheduled airport ferry refit, the replacement of the large garbage truck, and additional paving. City staff are not proposing any significant expansion to services for 2019. The expected increases in expense items, like contractual wage increases, increased RCMP costs, the recommendation just made by the Blue Ribbon Committee, and further increases in tax sharing with Port Edward, bringing the amount paid to our neighbour to $1.25 million this year, have all been offset by new tax from expansions and new industrial builds that do not qualify for the province's tax limiting legislation. Given the information known to date, staff are able to announce a budget surplus. This means no increase to the residential mill rate, but rather we are able to propose something not contemplated before. A mill rate decrease of 2%. There is enough of a surplus that we are also proposing to reserve half of the surplus to mitigate the future loan repayments necessary on the new RCMP detachment. This will reduce the cost impact to the taxpayer once we begin repaying the loan. An allocation will go to the RCMP force, which is still operating with restrictions since the days when the pulp mill closed. The same goes for our bylaw department. By returning one officer, it will enable the city to move forward with cleanup efforts in our community, something we have heard is of great concern for our citizens. And finally, as already mentioned, we can do all of this and still achieve a reduction to taxes. Our community, for reasons identified at the beginning of this presentation, has dealt with some of the highest taxes in the province. However, we have been unable to make changes to this circumstance. We are hopeful that we will prevail in our efforts to effect needed change. But thankfully, we have been able to receive the new benefits from investment in an industry that can be taxed at our municipal controlled rate. Now to move on to how the proposal will impact taxpayers. We understand there is some confusion as to what the mill rate is. It is the multiplier the city uses to calculate property taxes each year. The number represents how much you will pay per $1,000 of assessed value. For example, 1 mil is $1 per 1,000 assessed value. Given mill rates are based on assessed values, before we consider any increase or decrease to the taxes needed to be collected, we recalculate the previous year's mill rate to bring in the same amount of tax as was billed in the previous year. It is this adjusted rate that is increased or decreased depending on need. This slide shows that our mill rates have decreased over the past 6 years and again for 2019. The reason this reduction over the years has happened is because assessed values have increased, and since we adjust the mill rate to account for this change, it means the multiplier gets reduced. Assessed values did not increase much for the 2019 year, and so the tax reduction proposed makes up the majority of the decline in the rate this year over last year. We know that people want to know how the proposed rates will impact their particular property, whether it be their home or their business or both. For that reason, the next couple slides will outline how an owner can calculate the impact of the council-controlled mill rate that appears on the property tax notice. To calculate the impact to a property owner of the recommended mill rate, one needs to compare the 2018 combined general property tax to the amount calculated for 2019. The 2018 combined general property tax can be found on the 2018 property tax notice as shown in the red circles. These are the only categories council can decide on. All the rest of the tax levies are either set by another authority or calculated based on assessed values in Prince Rupert to pay the bill that the city is sent. The formula to calculate the general levy is on this slide. Take 2019's assessed value divided by 1,000 times the proposed 2019 mill rate. This is the municipal portion of the property tax for 2019. Compare this to the 2018 combined general property tax as found on the previous slide. This will inform you whether the taxes have gone up or down. We have provided all of the proposed mill rates on the next slide for viewers to calculate the potential impact to them, whether it be their home or their business property. On the far right-hand column is the proposed municipal rates for 2019. We have included what the 2018 rates were for comparison. I will pause here for a moment for our viewers. Here we have provided the effect to a homeowner with an average assessed value in both 2018 and 2019. The proposed mill rate decrease results in a savings of $28 for a residential property owner with an average assessed value home in both years. As mentioned on a previous slide, the proposed residential mill rate is lower than last year. To show in real dollars the effect this has on a homeowner provided the value of their home stayed the same, we have created the following table. This table is in a range of dollar values where the majority of residential assessed value levels exist. For simplicity, we have separated them in $50,000 increments. For example, if a homeowner's value in 2018 was $200,000, in 2018, municipal taxes paid were $1,238. At the proposed 2019 rate, the taxes are $1,200, or $38 less than in 2018. So if a homeowner's value stayed the same between 2018 and 2019, because the mill rate is lower than it was in 2018, the homeowner can expect to pay less tax in 2019. Some home values did increase during the year, some largely and some marginally. Others stayed the same and others decreased. This is why it is important to calculate the expected value of taxes individually to determine the impact to each property owner. Just a reminder to all property owners, this tax notice lists the following under the words tax levies. The city is the agent to collect all of these taxes on behalf of all of these authorities. City Council only controls the municipal rate. This is made up of the general levy and the library levy. We do not yet know what the other levies will be. The city recognizes that property taxes are not based on means to pay. Therefore, we want to make homeowners aware of some programs that help it to aid those that may qualify. The provincial government offers residents the homeowner grant and tax deferral programs. These programs are available to reduce taxes paid and defer the tax payment through a loan that is recovered at the time of sale. Please contact City Hall for details of each program or look on your property tax notice. BSC Assessment will release their revised roll on March 31st, which will take into account any appeals to assessed value. It is expected that changes are likely based on the revised roll, and any reductions to assessed values may impact the proposed mill rates. Staff is planning to have 2 public consultation opportunities. Both will be held during the regular meetings of Council here in Chambers on March 11th and March 25th. It will also be broadcast on Channel 10 and at www.princerupert.ca/live. Additionally, we will have a budget document available for readers March 1st at City Hall, the library, and the recreation complex. This presentation will also be placed on the city's website. Thank you to Council and our community for listening. We look forward to the consultation process to be held next month.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Some questions from Council. Councillor Niche.
Well, thank you for the best budget that I've heard since I've been sitting in the seat. The one thing that I would like to stress to everyone is that everyone will have a reason or a want how to spend that surplus, and I think that the reality is that the tax shift that's happened to residents over the years and small business, by not collecting the appropriate amount of taxes from industry, it's shifted it to the residents and to the small business. And I think this budget shows the first sign of us trying to shift that back and try and get people's residential taxes more in line with other towns in this province. By no means are we in a perfect position. We still have a long way to go. We still have a lot of work to do with industry to try and get them to pay the appropriate amount. As an example, we have Alta Gas coming on board this year who don't qualify for the capped rates. That is a big bonus to us this year. Now, whether they try to get into capped rates, we will find out. I think that everyone's going to have their requests, and we're going to hear it. I'm sure at public consultations, everyone will be saying, well, you know, I'm the museum, I want more money. I'm the police, I want more money. I'm a community group that needs more money, and everyone is going to want more money. The reality is that we still have a lot of work to do, and this is just us shifting to make the residents be more in line with the rest of this province. But we do have a lot of work in order to still work on the capped rates, a deal with Port Edward, and other things, generating revenue, which is probably one of the biggest things that we've done in the last 4 years, which is getting Watson Island back on the tax roll. And I think that is a major part in leading to this budget, and that has happened from us investing in staff to do the job that we needed to do. When we came in here, I walked through Watson Island 4 years ago, and it was like Chernobyl. And to go out there now and see where we're at now, to me is a shining moment for this city. To see that there's industry being built out there again, to see jobs being created, and to see taxes being collected. We still want more, but that's something we're going to work on in the next 4 years, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments on the budget? Councillor Morrow.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I think it's the first time we've heard less taxes and more services in the same sentence, so that's very, very good news. On the tax piece, I have one question on a tax that wasn't mentioned around the new employer health tax. I think it's 1.95% payroll tax. You'd referenced in your report contractual wage and benefit rate increases of an additional cost of $760,000. I'm wondering, of that $760,000, what is the additional cost that's specific to the employer health tax that the province has levied?
That tax is costing the city approximately $200,000.
And so that's 200 of that 760, and that's included in this budget. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, we were able to absorb it with the new taxation.
Councillor Ady.
Thank you. I'm really glad that this is the first budget that I've had anything to do with. So I'm not going to claim any credit for it. But I just would like to, similarly to what I said earlier, is encourage the public to be a part of the consultation process. Let us know what you think. As Councillor Niche said, you know, there's going to be a lot of people who will say a lot of things, and we can't address all of them. But in my view, what we need to do is strike a balance, if we can, between those things that we know we have to do related to public safety. We've had lots of conversations about water. I think that conversation carries on. But also some of those initiatives that affect the livability of the community. In terms of refurbishing downtown and those kinds of projects, I think we have to try and get the balance right and to take advantage of the position that we find ourselves in.
Other comments? Councillor Cunningham.
Well, after 3 years of asking for a bylaw officer, I like that. I said earlier today, I hope we get one, and I guess Christmas came early for me. So, and thank you very much. I've been sitting in this seat for 4 or 5 years, and it's the first time I've seen a decrease. And the one thing I do like seeing is that our small businesses are getting a break, because they were up there with one of the highest rates in the province, and now they're probably dropped down in that top 10, 20%. So it's going to be a help for them, and that'll be passed off, hopefully, to the residents of town. And I'm just hoping the other jurisdictions don't take advantage of our decrease and increase theirs, but we have no control over that. So we'll see what happens when the final shoe drops with the assessments coming out. But people have to realize that we can only control, as you said, 2 parts of that whole assessment, and whatever happens on the others is well beyond our control. So we'll see what happens in the end. But it's nice to see that the work we've done in the last 4 years is coming to fruition. You know, there's been a lot of work done that people didn't even see. a lot of meetings that people thought we were hiding something. And this is all coming together, and I think in the next 2-3 years, people are going to realize that a lot of those closed meetings were really about getting to the point we're at now. And there was a lot of legal points and things like that, and a lot of extra work put in by staff and that. And there was some groundbreaking things done out at Watson Island, where MOE is now approaching brownfields in a different way than they ever have before. And that was all done by our staff. So I really think when you look at the overall picture, it's been a good thing for both us sitting here in this room and the staff to come to this end, and I can only see better things in the future. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to thank Corinne for her presentation, and as a new councillor here as well, I can take no credit, although I do enjoy the first budget presentation being a tax decrease, so that's always nice. This was one of the main things I ran for council. One of the main reasons is to kind of offset some of the burden on residential and small business, and then kind of find other opportunity for industrial development. So I can only imagine the next 4 years are going to be even brighter, so we'll keep up the good work. And I just wanted to thank the incumbents, so the past mayor and council, for all the work that they've done over the past 4 years to make it possible for this year to decrease taxes. So thank you all.
Sorry, I just had one follow-up question that Councillor Cunningham reminded me of. The deadline you had said for, or the revised rule, was March 31st. Has the deadline already passed for appeal?
Yes, that's correct. It was the end of January.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. And last 4 years, we are working hard to generate new tax revenues, and this is today we can decrease tax, and hopefully next 4 years we can bring more tax revenue and can get more lower our taxes. So thank you for your hard work.
Anything else? Well, I should say thank you too then. I just actually want to say that I think it's hard for the public to fully appreciate just how hard our staff work. I know Ms. Bauman spends her weekends here, Sunday nights here, preparing these budgets, getting these things in order. We're in a really special time in Prince Rupert's history because we have a really motivated, team-oriented staff that are happy, and they're excited about their jobs, and they're showing up here every day, really motivated and invested in Prince Rupert. A lot of people that work here now are from Rupert, who went away to get from school and have come back and are here to stay. And these are our next 30-year plus employees, and it's our job as short-term folks that are in this position to make sure that the people that are going to be here long-term are going to have a place that they enjoy, and the results are showing what happens when a staff is motivated and has a good working environment and are supported by their council. And you can see the leadership that our staff have taken, and I know it's been no easy task for our management team and all the employees we have from all the departments to make it work with all the resources they have. And I think the message here today is that we're finally starting to turn a corner. As Councillor Niche said, we have a long way to go still, but I believe this is the year where we start to really come on the other side of where we've been. And it's time to start changing the narrative about Prince Rupert. It's time to start changing how we perceive ourselves as a community. It's time to bring that pride back. And although it's just a 2% tax decrease, it's been decades since this has even ever been considered. So I think it should be no small thing to be considered that we're in a position to be able to do this today. So thanks very much for everything you guys have done here. We absolutely appreciate all the work you do, and I know that you're going to continue to work hard, and we're going to keep working with you guys to make sure that this town really flourishes into the future. Thanks. Okay. Next up. Oh, I guess I have a recommendation to do for that. So, 6A then is a recommendation that council receive this report for information purposes and delay any direction to staff until after public consultation and final BC assessment values are released. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. So once again, there'll be 2 public comment periods on March 11th and also on March 25th to comment on anything to do with the budget. The budget will be made available online the library, at the rec center, here at City Hall. Please come and let us know your thoughts, comments on the budget, those type of things. And in April or May, we'll finalize the budget from there. So moving on, we have a report from our city planner, a couple reports. First is the application for development variance permit 970 at Edward Avenue.
This is application for development variance permit for the property located at 970 Chamberlain Avenue.
Edward Avenue.
What did they say?
Edward.
Edward.
Edward Avenue.
The other one's Chamberlain. That's coming up next.
Yes. Sorry about that. It is to vary the rear property setback from 10 feet to 6 feet, therefore a variance of 4 feet, in order to accommodate better location of the house and the larger driveway. This is not uncommon in cul-de-sac, especially the properties that are in the apex of cul-de-sac, where there's a bit of an awkward front property front property line. This went through a council meeting last regular meeting February 11th, at which time council approved public notification, which were issued immediately after the council meeting. As the date of this report and the date today, I did not receive any objections to for the council to approve this application. And that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any comments? Recommendation that the development variance permit application DP 1901 for 970 Edward Avenue proceeds to final consideration. Moved by Councillor Ady, second by Councillor Renhowa. All's in favor? Motion's carried. Chamberlain now.
This is the only visual aid I have for this report, Mr. Mayor, and it just locates the property at 1051 Chamberlain Avenue, commonly referred to as Neptune, which is currently for sale. The Macro Properties plans to renovate the asset to senior housing is no longer feasible. The communication received since pending this report from Macro Properties notes higher than estimated renovations, costs, other seniors housing oriented projects coming on market, and all of which are assisted rental and transportation and location challenges. Mr. Warburton's proposal alludes to some of the above shortcomings in his proposal, which is attached. Mr. Warburton's proposal hinges on discharging the covenant, which is for seniors of 55 years and older, which is also attached to this report, and amending the zoning to revert to original travel or accommodation. These are two separate but connected, very specific, with a very specific land use instruments. As a quick background, the Neptune Motor Inn was constructed in late 70s and in the 80s and 90s provided accommodation for construction crews and shutdown crews working on Ridley Island and Watson Island. It also provided a viable accommodation during the busy fishing season and then increasing tourism visits. In late 90s, the city and indeed the region underwent substantial changes resulting from downturn in and restructuring of forestry and fisheries resource-based economy. These changes also affected many aspects of city commercial fabric, including hotels, motels, and anyone providing short-term stays. Decline in overnight stays was not unique to Neptune, but it proved to be fatal for its motel business as well as restaurant business. In the mid-2000s, the region and indeed Prince Rupert experienced the pressure from a new type of business work travelers that often stayed for more than a week and may return at some frequency. In our planning for major projects initiative, we refer to them as shadow population. This type of demand depends on length of the proposed project, promotion, and construction. In other words, during the pre-construction, environmental assessment, and if the project reaches permitting stage, there are a number of public relation personnel and technical consultants who travel to Prince Rupert on frequent basis. As well, during the construction, should the project proceed to that stage, there are many who support the main construction crews who are generally housed in camps, but those are left to find their accommodation as they can. A general observation with respect to short-term stays accommodation is that the more successful facilities are located closer to or in nucleus of the city's central commercial area. This could be attributed to the points raised above and other traveler habits the accommodation industry is starting to collect and incorporate in their business planning. Mr. Warburton's proposal is clear and convincing on paper. To his credit, the paper exercise is supported by the experience of successfully operating a smaller short-term accommodation, First Avenue Executive Suites, which is similar to the nature proposed for this property. We also have an example of similar development on India Avenue, which is called Mountain View Executive Suites. With respect to costs, there are no cost or budget impact on the city of Prince Rupert other than a staff time, should the council agree or deny discharge of this covenant. The applicant will be responsible for the costs associated with discharge of the Section 219 covenant from the title, which is estimated at $400. It will be done by city solicitor. And in conclusion, from a purely land use analysis, the subject site is located in a light industrial zone. The city is lacking light industrial land to the point that the demand on light industrial land is spilling into the commercial central commercial zones. From the perspective from that perspective, the best use for the property is light industrial. That said, we seem to be in a period of time where new construction costs are very high and the existing assets are highly valued to the point that sometimes the business case depends on least amount of repurposing or renovations. This is not only true for this property, but generally for our commercial and residential assets, including single family and multiple family residential units. So in the long term, the property is best suited for light industrial use. In the short term, and to avoid better than vacant attributes, allowing it to revert to its original use will suffice. That concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nish, then Councillor Cunningham. Do you want to say something? Oh, I thought you had your hand up there. Good.
I think if we were looking at this from a new development perspective, I think it's not fitting to the area. But you know, just being with all the light industrial stuff, like you say, its best use would be light industrial. But being that this is an existing building and it had an existing use already for what's being proposed, you know, I would rather see it full of people being used rather than sitting empty with nothing happening. That being said, I also want any prospective new owners to realize that this is a light industrial area, and if there's an air impact wrench running from a mechanic shop or something in the area that's running, that will be noise pollution for someone who's trying to sleep. As long as they're understanding of that, which I'm sure they've done their research and are willing to take it on. There's many people that stayed there for the last 40 years or 30 years before that. So I'm fully in support of taking this covenant off and allowing it to return to the use that it served for many years. If the building was not there, then I would agree more with it, that it would be better to be seen as light industrial, but I am in support of returning it back to its original use.
Councillor Cunningham, then Councillor Renhauer.
I support this 100%. It's taken an old building that's an eyesore. It's going to be renovated, and Mr. Warburton did the same thing on First Avenue Suites. He's got an impeccable reputation. He took an old building there, and it's a accommodation that's sought after by people coming into town for whether it's one night or 1 week. And I think what we'll see with this development here is basically the same thing. I think it's going to be an attractive development and just another asset that the city can use for its tourism as well as anything else. And I'm quite sure Mr. Warburton will, as he's done his homework, and that I don't see releasing the covenant from this as a problem, because we've got 42 units coming in online here from Metlakatla, as well as the affordable housing units down on Park. And like he says in his report, with the anchor in and everything else, I think we've alleviated a lot of pressure on the affordable and senior housing. What the future brings, who knows, but I think this is going to be a good fit for the next 5-10 years. And what I've seen him do in the past, I'm quite sure he'll take the same quality of workmanship and quality of service in this building too. So I totally support it.
Councillor Renhauer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. I think we are in demand of new accommodation, and I will support this one. My only question would be like, do we need any traffic study on this one to discharge this covenant, or we are okay with that?
So as I mentioned earlier, the zoning, land use, and covenant land use are connected. If you decide that to take the covenant, to discharge the covenant, that will sit as an aside until the zoning process finishes. During the zoning amendment process, the same question will be forwarded to Ministry of Highways about this property being used for travelers' accommodation, and at that time they will determine if they will require a traffic impact study.
Thank you. So I'm in favor of this one.
Other comments? Okay, so the recommendation is that council approves the discharge of covenant subject to Mr. Warburton applying and receiving a zoning amendment to permit the proposed use and payment of all legal costs associated. Moved by Councillor Renhauer, seconded by Councillor Niche. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Next up, a report from our Chief Financial Officer regarding authorization for short-term borrowing from the MFA.
Thanks. In 2018, Council approved the upgrade of the Prince Rupert RCMP detachment cell block, as well as the purchase and installation at Public Works of 6 modular offices which were used in the Alcan modernization project. The trailers were approved due to the failing conditions of the existing Public Works building, which is over 60 years old. Both of these projects were to be funded through short-term borrowing. This resolution gives authority to borrow from the MFA and makes up part of the required documentation with which to obtain the financing.
Any questions? Okay, recommendation that council approves and make the following resolution. Whereas under section 175 of the community charter, council may incur a liability, and whereas council adopted the 2018 5-year financial plan bylaw number 3426 2018 on 23rd of April 2018, and therefore be it resolved that council gives authorization to borrow from the Municipal Finance Authority $1.15 million, $1,150,000 for the upgrade of the Prince Rupert RCM detachment cell block and the purchase and installation of the Public Works office complex, repayment of which will be made over 5 years with no provisions for renewal. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Moreau. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And lastly, we have a report from our communications manager regarding grant application for refurbishment of the CNR Station Heritage Building.
Thank you. So the city is currently looking at a number of funding opportunities to refurbish the CN Heritage Building down at Quinitza at the waterfront. We've also made application to move the airport ferry launch to that area as well. So we're looking at developing Rupert's Landing, is what we're calling it, as kind of a welcoming area to the community, and the CN Heritage Building is part of that. So I'm looking for council to make a decision with respect to the NDIT Economic Diversification Infrastructure Fund for funding to support the redevelopment of the CN Heritage Rail Station.
Any comments? Councillor Niche?
I think that people would love to see our waterfront redone. Now, whether all these grants come in, to be determined. But I can't see why not allowing to apply for grant money, what good that would do to us. So I definitely am in full support of trying to get as much free money as we can from as many people as we can. Thank you.
Other comments? So just also want to say that this is also working with the Redesign Rupert initiative that's focusing on the waterfronts as well as the downtown plan and recruitment and retention. So all as part of a bigger vision to work on those particular areas of the community, get those places revitalized. So this is one portion within a bigger plan to get the Rupert's Landing piece done. And I want to thank the communications manager for seeking and looking for these grants, because she's the one applying for them as well and writing them. And so so they're doing lots of extra things on the side of their decks to make sure that we get this type of money in. So the recommendations that council approved by resolution, the application to the NDIT Economic Diversification Infrastructure Fund for funding to support the redevelopment of the CN Heritage Rail Station. Moved by Councillor Murrow, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, some reports, questions, inquiries from members of council. I just want to quickly mention that it was announced last Saturday a new capital grant program for northern communities, $100 million grant for all northwest communities. We've been working closely with many communities along the line to work with the provincial government to get a revenue sharing agreement that would see that type of revenue come in on a yearly and consistent basis to all our communities. This is just a one-time grant, not a revenue sharing deal. And so I just wanted to make it known that the conditions of that grant haven't been released to the city yet, so we have no details yet on what the conditions of the grant will be. And we hope that sometime in the next couple of months we'll have all that information, and then we'll be able to have more dialogue with the community about that. So just wanted to put that out there. But very good news. Each community is getting, every community under 10,000 people is getting between $1 and $6 million, and every community over 10,000 is getting between $6 and $9 million straight injection for capital and planning purposes. So it's been a good 4-year battle to get that to happen, but we've been able to do that. Now the next stage here is to try to get that to be a consistent amount on a yearly basis for a 25 to 40 year agreement, which in many ways would save the northern corridor in a lot of ways. So just want to mention that. Any other reports from council tonight? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to should always make sure that your microphone there, Councillor Cunningham.
Just to follow up, 2 meetings ago we talked about sending a letter to the Department of Highways about Park Avenue between the Anchor, our new affordable housing project, and the transition. There's approximately 100 people living on that side of the road right now with a convenience store on the other side. And I've just noticed just on the Anchor Inn right there, people crossing the road. It's quite dark at night and that, and I just wondered if there's been any response to that request.
Councillor Ms. Bauman.
We did speak with them, and they said that they would definitely engage in a study.
Okay, and just want to reiterate that it's Children's Festival at the Civic Center this weekend. Anyone that's got young kids and want them to have a good time, they can take their kids down there, and anyone that doesn't have young kids can go down there and volunteer.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Adie, seconded by Councillor Murrow. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Have a great evening. Thank you.